Hello and welcome. My name is Evgeny Rusakov and you're watching TVP World, interview from Vilnius. Results of the meeting between the Russian and American delegations in Riyadh left everyone astonished. It is safe to say that Europe and Ukraine were not ready for this kind of American policy turnout. To discuss what's happening now between Russia, USA and the rest, we are joined today by the American studies expert, Alexandra Filippenko. Alexandra, glad to see you back with us here.
Evgeny, thank you for having me.
I underlined this Russia, USA and the rest, because right now, at this specific moment, it looks like there's Russia, there's USA, and unfortunately the rest. Us, Europe, Ukraine, and the rest of the world. So, what's your take in general on what has been happening recently, the previous couple of weeks?
Definitely, the U.S. administration and Donald Trump really wants to show that the U.S. is a great power that can shift diplomatic alliances and that they do not see Europe right now as a power that should be at the table talking about the Russia-Ukraine war. The U.S. is trying to prove that the United States are the main savior of Ukraine, and the United States gave so much more to Ukraine than Europe, while Europe has to take care of Ukraine way more, because as Donald Trump has said many, many times, there's an ocean between us. That's what this phrase he's using all the time. So the United States really look as if they want to solve the issue in Europe and freeze everything and go back and only take care of what's happening in the United States and on the American continent. But behind all this, we see actually, first of all, the will of President Trump to counter China mostly and not take care of European issues that much. That's his main point.
We will come back to that, most definite. So how would you explain what happened in Riyadh in specific?
In Riyadh, I would say that it's the beginning of talks. It's absolutely not the end of discussion.
But everyone was like speechless.
Speechless, yes, because everyone, including me, I was also, I would say, nervous, keeping an eye on what's happening, and looking and listening to all those different kinds of information, different news coming out of Riyadh. And it was sometimes shocking, sometimes I stayed in awe, sometimes I listened carefully and tried to re-listen and understand what they meant. And it looks like, for both sides, this was a show. It was more of a show.
Okay.
They decided to...
Mutual admiration?
Mutual admiration and some nice words, even though, let's remember, who headed the U.S. delegation? Marco Rubio, who called Vladimir Putin a gangster, a war criminal, a murderer. So keeping that in mind, of course, the situation seemed quite weird. But we need to keep this in mind. We need to understand the real views of those people and not to fall into this trap of Russian propaganda that is now saying that everything is great.
Okay, so what's your take then on those experts that say that USA completely lost that, well, first round of negotiations, if we can call it that way, to Russia?
There's another way of looking at it, as you know, we all, after Brzezinski, we're all calling it a big chess game of chess, of course. And this is one of the ideas how to look at it, is Turkish gambit, as if Donald Trump is giving out a little bit and he's giving Vladimir Putin what Putin wants. This fireworks, that Putin is not an aggressor, saying all the nice words, calling him, maybe even talking about meeting him, etc., etc., but at the same time, really getting what the U.S. wants, and that's the control of the Arctic and Ukraine resources.
But here's the thing then. As we all know, Trump first made a phone call to Vladimir Putin, and then he had a phone conversation with Vladimir Zelensky. So that is a kind of a serious signal, I would say. What's your take on this?
That's a serious signal, and that's a signal, also a signal within Trump's, I would say, tactics. But I think that I would quote Vladimir Zelensky, who after that call talked to Meet the Press on NBC, and he said that after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, after 2022, he became way more more skeptical about words and more realistic and looking
about
deeds and about what's happening at the front. And everyone has to adapt and adjust to what's happening at the front. That's the main point of interest. And so as President Zelensky said, he's ready to go a long way as long as Ukraine has its sovereignty and the war is over.
Let's move on. So after the meeting in Riyadh, Keith Kellogg, special U.S. envoy, met with Zelensky in Kiev, but they did not organize that, what becomes usual, a press conference after that meeting. What would you say on this?
I must say that simultaneously, at the same time, the U.S. Secret Services, and not that they announced, but it was published in the press that U.S. Secret Services came to the conclusion that Russia doesn't actually want the end of war. It doesn't want the fighting to stop. Russia, the Kremlin sees that it can gain more territory. So if we take this into consideration, that the U.S. really understands and sees that Kremlin doesn't want to stop, probably they don't want to, let's say, have a press conference with Keith Kellogg and with Vladimir Zelensky. That would state that the United States are firmly behind Ukraine. They want to drag Russia into negotiation process. They want to drag Putin deeper into this process. So that is why probably they really didn't want to have that press conference with Keith Kellogg, even though we understand that Keith Kellogg is on Ukraine's side. That we understand, and I must say that Marco Rubio and others probably too.
But I have to say that there was also a very nice observation that Keith Kellogg somehow disappeared. He didn't take part in those negotiations in Riyadh, and he somehow disappeared. It looks like the ones that are pro-Ukrainian are put aside. Do you think so, or is just how people see things, how maybe I see things, and I may be mistaken for sure?
As Mike Waltz, the president's national security advisor, Mike Waltz, have said in his interview that there are two tracks of negotiations. The track with Russia, the track that is taking care of those people that are not ready to call Russia the aggressor right now, even though they've said that in the past. And there is this Ukrainian track. They call it Ukrainian and Allied track. And that's what Keith Kellogg takes part in. So as we've said at the beginning of our conversation, that the U.S. is only at the beginning of talks. It's only the beginning. We're far from the end. We don't even see this end. So it's only the beginning. So there are these two tracks. And of course, the attention was at Riyadh because there were no connections and no negotiations, no talks between Russia and the U.S. So that's why everyone was so concentrated on that. Simultaneously, Keith Kellogg was in Ukraine. Simultaneously, Keith Kellogg was talking to NATO and talking to European allies, but it was not in the spotlight because Trump was commenting on Riyadh. Everyone was commenting on Riyadh. But these are two tracks of negotiations.
You've mentioned allies, an interesting topic. Europe. Why is USA behaving like that with Europe? What happened? What's the problem with Europe here?
Right now, we are seeing the continuation of President Trump's idea about Europe, that Europe has to take care of its own defense.
Contribute and all that stuff.
Contribute more to the defense of the collective defense of Europe. And for example, in the first term, President Trump has been saying about 2% of GDP that all countries of Europe have to pay to collective defense in the North Atlantic Organization. And now Donald Trump is saying that it's 4% or even more. Like, for example, Poland. Poland gives way more than anyone else. It's the biggest contributor, talking about GDP, the percentage of GDP. So this is an example that Donald Trump wants the whole Europe to follow. Spain still doesn't give even 2%.
It's 1.2, something like that.
Yeah,
exactly. I don't remember the numbers, but yeah, it's somewhere there.
So now Donald Trump is pushing Europe to become more independent, because the main idea and the main will and the main desire of Donald Trump is to really take care of U.S. issues on the American continent, and take care, I would put it this way, of China and U.S. relations with China. That's the main focus.
Brilliant. It's good that you've mentioned China. You've mentioned China in the very beginning, and again now. My next question is about China, because when I saw all those, I don't know if I can call it plays, USA plays with Russia, I thought that they might be doing that kind of stuff to switch Russia off in its possible future conflict in US, possible future conflict with China. What's your take on this?
I would say yes. China is the biggest threat of the U.S. That's how Donald Trump puts it. He says that he respects Xi Jinping very much. We've heard something.
Okay, we've heard those rhetorics. So
about
okay.
Authoritarian leaders, yes. He respects him so much. He's such a great guy. But tariffs. There should be great tariffs on China, and Donald Trump is really worried about the Arctic and the Arctic region, that China can build this northern trade way through Russia and through the Arctic region. This will make it so much easier for Chinese goods to come to Europe, to come to Canada, to come to the United States. So, and also, of course, the military might of China in South Pacific. This is what Donald Trump is worried about. And actually, China just had military drills right by Australia, a big ally of the United States. They had their military drills over there, and the US is really worried about China. This is the main reason why Donald Trump wants to have any kind of relationship with Putin. For him, Putin is not an ally. Donald Trump is not interested in Russian economy. Russian economy is less powerful than Italian economy or Spanish, etc.,
sure.
etc., any country of the European Union. So he's only interested in Russia as in a nuclear power. He really wants talks on nuclear stability, but also he doesn't want Russia to be an ally of China. He doesn't want Russia to be this close to China. First of all, because
do you think that is a successful plan?
We can see how quick Russian propaganda jumped from being in love with Xi Jinping to talking real good things about the horrible West, the collective West. I mean Donald Trump, first of all, of course, because they see all the propaganda have been talking about of the United States, American president being the evil, the biggest evil of all.
Well, now he's not.
No, he's not. While Xi Jinping was the great leader, the great friend, they quoted Xi Jinping on TV all the time. They had posters with Xi Jinping all around Russian cities. Look how easy it was for Donald Trump to switch Russia from admiring Xi Jinping to admiring Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump is the evil. So I think the propaganda is also a mirror of the society somehow, and a mirror of the Kremlin, that's for sure. So I think that it is already working. It's not in the future.
That's interesting. It's interesting to observe. Okay, final question, briefly. What should we expect in the nearest time?
Donald Trump definitely wants a ceasefire. He is talking about a peace deal, but I think that the first step is a ceasefire. And I'm not sure that it's going to happen so soon as Donald Trump talked it would. He said for 24 hours, then he said 100 days, then 6 months. It's changing. So, but Donald Trump really wants it because he wants to take care of the US issues, not European issues, not Ukrainian issues, nothing else. American issues and South Pacific, China, and that are his focus. That's I think we should expect probably really a ceasefire, but at what cost for Ukraine? This is a big question.
Okay, Alexandra, thank you so much. As usual, very well, I would say very informative discussion with you. Thank you for joining us today, and I really hope to see you. We see how the things turn out, so I really hope to see you in the nearest time in our studio.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I would like to remind our viewers that our guest for today was an American studies expert, Alexandra Filippenko. You're watching TVP World. Stay with us.